I gave him everything. My time, my tears, my savings, my future. He smiled, took it all, and walked away without looking back. But here's the part no one tells you. The woman he broke didn't stay broken. And what happened next, he never saw it coming. Before I tell you this story, I need you to do something for me. If you've ever loved someone who didn't deserve it, someone who took your light and used it to shine in someone else's direction, hit that like button right now. Subscribe if you haven't already, and stay with me until the very end, because this story has a twist that will make your jaw drop. I promise you. Stay with me. I want to start by telling you who I was before any of this happened, because I think that matters. My name is Lila, and before Daniel ever walked through my door, I was whole. I owned a small bakery in a quiet, mid-sized town, the kind of town where everyone knows the name of your grandmother's dog and the smell of your Tuesday morning cinnamon rolls float 3 blocks down the street. I had built that bakery from nothing, from a dream I had at 19 and a loan I took at 24, and years of flour-covered hands and early mornings that started at 4 a.m. when the rest of the world was still sleeping. I was not lonely. I was not searching. I want you to understand that clearly. I was content in a way that is rare and precious, a woman who had built her own life and actually liked living in it. Then, one rainy Thursday afternoon in October, Daniel walked in. He shook the rain from his jacket at the door, smiled at me like I was the best thing he'd seen all week, and ordered a black coffee and a slice of my honey almond cake. He ate slowly, like he was in no hurry to be anywhere else. Before he left, he told me it was the best thing he'd ever tasted. I thanked him. I didn't think twice about it. But he came back the next Thursday, and the one after that, and then he started coming on Tuesdays, too. He was an architect, or so he told me, working on a residential project on the edge of town. He had this easy, quiet confidence about him, not loud or showy, just steady. He asked me questions about the bakery, about my recipes, about how I got started. He listened when I talked, really listened, the kind of listening where you can feel someone's full attention on you, like warmth from a fire. I was careful at first. I'd seen charming men before. Charm, I had learned, is not a character trait. It is a tool. But Daniel felt different because he wasn't rushing. He wasn't performing. He just kept showing up Thursday after Thursday, Tuesday after Tuesday, until one evening he asked if he could take me to dinner, and I said yes before I even realized I was smiling. We fell into each other the way that feels inevitable in hindsight. Sunday mornings with him sketching building designs at my kitchen table while I baked. Long evening drives with no destination. He talked about his dream of opening his own architecture firm one day. Something small, something his. He talked about it with this quiet hunger that I found beautiful. I believed in that dream with my whole chest. I told him so. He looked at me like I had just handed him something sacred. 18 months in, I was completely, recklessly, joyfully in love with this man. And then, slowly, things began to shift. It was subtle at first, the way bad things usually are. He started coming to the bakery less. His texts took longer to come back. When he was present, he was slightly somewhere else, like his mind had moved into a room I wasn't allowed to enter. I told myself it was the stress of his firm struggling. He had told me work was hard, that contracts were falling through, that the industry was brutal. So I did what I always did when someone I loved was hurting. I leaned in closer. I gave him money, 20,000 rupees at first, just to cover a supplier payment he said couldn't wait, then more. Over the course of 6 months, I had quietly pulled nearly 200,000 rupees from my bakery savings account. Every time he asked, he called it a loan. He said it with such certainty, such ease, that I never questioned it. I redesigned the back office of my bakery and turned it into a workspace for him so he could have somewhere quiet to draw up his plans. I cooked for him, I listened to him. I carried his stress alongside my own and never complained once. And when I started noticing the inconsistencies, a business trip to Karachi that didn't quite add up, a phone that was always face down on the table, a name that appeared once in his messages and then never spoken again, I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself, this is what anxiety does. It invents problems where there are none. Then I confronted him. I did it gently. I sat across from him in my own bakery, in the space I had built with my own 2 hands, and I told him I felt like something had changed between us, and I wanted to understand what was happening. I told him I loved him, and I wasn't going anywhere. I just wanted us to be honest with each other. He looked at me for a long moment, and then he told me I was insecure. He told me I was being suffocating. He said I was making problems out of thin air because I had trust issues. He said it all so calmly, so reasonably, that I sat there and absorbed it. I said I was sorry. I actually apologized to him for asking him to be honest with me. That moment, me sitting across from the man I loved saying sorry for his lie, that was the moment I began to disappear. I just didn't know it yet. 3 weeks later, on a slow Wednesday afternoon, a woman walked in my bakery. She was well-dressed, composed, and she looked around the space with the kind of careful attention that told me she had been here before, at least in someone's description. She looked at me and said, very politely, "Are you the woman Daniel is seeing?" The world tilted. I said yes. I didn't know what else to say. She took out her phone. She showed me photographs. Daniel at a dinner table, smiling. Daniel at a family gathering, arm around a woman with a soft face and happy eyes. A photo of the same woman wearing a ring, a beautiful, delicate gold ring with a small diamond at its center. The woman in the photo was her. Her name, she told me, was Nora, and she and Daniel had been engaged for 14 months. 14 months, the entire length of what I thought was my relationship. She was not angry at me. She had known, she said, that something was wrong. She had come to find the truth herself. She was trembling slightly as she spoke, this composed, well-dressed woman, and I understood in that moment that we were both standing in the wreckage of the same man's making. I didn't scream. I didn't cry, not in front of her. Something cold and very still moved through me instead. I asked her to sit down. I made her a cup of tea. We sat together in my bakery, 2 women undone by the same person, and I listened to her speak. Before she left, she squeezed my hand at the door. I watched her walk away, and then I stood very still for a very long time staring at the street outside. That night, Daniel came to the bakery. He walked in like he always did, easy, comfortable, like he owned a piece of the air in the room. I let him sit down, and then I told him everything his fiancée had told me. I watched his face change as I spoke. The ease drained out of him. But then something remarkable happened. He didn't fall apart. He didn't beg for forgiveness. He explained, calmly, methodically. He told me that Nora's family was funding his firm, that it was a practical arrangement, that these things were complicated, that I was seeing it in black and white when life was full of gray. And then he asked me with a straight face and a voice that didn't even waver if we could continue seeing each other quietly. He actually asked me that. I looked at him for a very long moment. I thought about the 24-year-old version of me who had taken out a loan to build this bakery. I thought about the 4 a.m. mornings. I thought about what this space had cost me and what it meant. And then I said 2 sentences. I said, "You used my own bakery as your office and my own money as your resource while you planned a future with someone else. Now get out of my bakery." He left. And I locked the door behind him and sat down on the floor of my kitchen and cried until I had no more tears left in me. The weeks that followed were the hardest of my life, harder than the loan, harder than the early years of building the business, because this was not financial pain or physical exhaustion. This was the specific, bone-deep grief of realizing that someone you gave your trust to used it like a tool and then threw it away. My closest friend, Rosa, came every day. She didn't push me to talk or tell me to be strong. She just showed up with food and sat with me in the silence, and I will never have the right words to tell her what that meant. The bakery suffered. I barely got out of bed some mornings. I lost weight. I stopped baking. There was one night, a Tuesday at 3 in the morning, when I sat on the kitchen floor of the bakery surrounded by everything I had built, and I genuinely could not find the energy to stand up. Not because I was thinking of doing something drastic, but because heartbreak, real heartbreak, is a physical thing. It lives in your chest and your legs and the backs of your hands. It makes the world feel too heavy to move through. And it was on one of those terrible, dark mornings when I finally forced myself to sit down and go through my financial records to understand exactly how much I had lost that I found something that changed everything. The money I had given Daniel, the money I believed was a loan, it had not gone toward his firm's suppliers. It had gone toward a jewelry purchase. I found the receipt still in a folder he had left in the back office, the receipt for a gold ring with a small diamond at its center, the ring on Nora's finger, the ring I had paid for. I sat with that for a long time, and then I kept looking through the papers. That's when I found the document. It was a building permit application for Daniel's new architecture firm, and listed as collateral in the application was my bakery's address. My name was on the form as a guarantor. I had never signed anything. I had never seen this document in my life. My signature was on it anyway, and it was not mine. He had forged my name. I called Rosa immediately. She was at my door within 20 minutes, and 2 days later we were sitting across from attorney Priya, a sharp, direct woman who specialized in financial fraud cases. And I laid every document on her desk. She looked through them without expression. Then she looked up at me and said, "This is criminal fraud. We have everything we need." She also told me something that made my blood run cold, and then, slowly, something entirely different, something that felt almost like the first breath after a very long time underwater. Daniel, she told me, had done this before. In the process of investigating his financial filings, 2 other women had already surfaced in other cities. Same pattern, different faces, same damage. I made a decision in that meeting. I was not going to collapse. I was going to build. I went back to my bakery that evening and I turned on every light. I stood in the middle of my kitchen and I started baking. Not for the shop, just for myself. Cinnamon rolls at 9 o'clock at night because that's what I needed. I needed the smell of something warm. I needed my hands to remember what they were made for. Slowly, painfully, imperfectly, with many bad days still scattered between the good ones, I came back to life. I redesigned the bakery's interior. I introduced a new menu. I started catering small events on weekends, engagement parties, birthday brunches, a few corporate lunches. Word traveled the way it does in a small town, which is to say, quickly and with feeling. A writer for a regional food magazine came in one afternoon, ordered 3 things, and spent an hour asking me about my work. 2 months later, there was a small feature with a photograph of my honey almond cake. The headline called it the most quietly extraordinary bakery in the province. And then the phone rang. It was a hospitality development group. They had seen the feature. They were opening a curated food and artisan market in a new commercial building in the city, and they wanted a signature bakery as their anchor vendor. They were offering a full partnership, funding, infrastructure, creative control entirely mine. They told me the address of the building. I had to ask them to repeat it. It was the same building, the same address Daniel had listed on his fraudulent permit application, the building he had tried to use my name to secure, the space he had tried to claim before I even knew he was claiming it. And now, through the most extraordinary turn of events I could never have written myself, that space was being offered to me, legally, legitimately, with my name on the door. I sat at my kitchen table for a very long time after that phone call. And then I laughed. Not the brittle, hollow kind of laugh that sits at the edge of tears. A real laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere deep and surprised and undeniably alive. Meanwhile, the fraud case moved forward. Daniel's attorney tried to negotiate. 3 other women came forward with their own documentation. Nora's family, upon learning the full picture, withdrew every rupee of financial backing from his firm immediately. The firm collapsed before it ever truly opened. Daniel called my phone 7 times in 1 week. I answered none of them. I had nothing to say. Some people don't deserve the weight of your words, and I had already spent enough of them on him. He left the city eventually, not in any dramatic way, just the quiet, slow disappearance of a person who has nothing left to perform for. I heard through people who knew him that he had moved back to his parents' house in another province. I heard this information the way you hear about weather in a city you no longer live in. It registered, and then it passed. The day I cut the ribbon at the new location, Rosa stood beside me. Attorney Priya was there. A dozen regulars from the original bakery had driven to the city just to be present. The smell of cinnamon and butter moved through the whole building like a welcome. I stood in the middle of that space, the space he had tried to steal, the space that was now mine. And I felt something I don't have a perfect word for. Not triumph exactly, not relief, something quieter and more permanent than both of those things. Something that felt like the truest version of myself finally arriving after a very long journey. He broke me like glass. That part is true. He reached into the most trusting part of me and shattered it without hesitation. But here is what he didn't understand about glass and about me. Glass, when it's melted down and remade with intention and heat and time, becomes something stronger than it was before. It becomes something that catches light in ways it never could when it was whole. I am not the same woman I was before Daniel walked through my door. I am not the version of me who trusted so completely and so blindly. But I am more myself than I have ever been. I know now what I can survive. I know now what I have built and what no one can take from me. And I know with a certainty that sits in my bones that my pain was not a punishment. It was a preparation. If this story moved something in you, if you have ever loved someone who took that love and used it carelessly, who broke something beautiful because they could, I want you to know this. The breaking is not the end of your story. It is just a chapter. And the chapters that come after it, if you let them, will be the ones worth reading. Leave me a comment below. Tell me, have you ever been through something that felt like complete destruction, only to discover it was actually clearing the ground for something better? I want to read every single response. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do, because every week I bring you stories like this one, real, human, unbroken stories about women who chose to rise. I'll see you in the next one.